It's playbook, I tell you.
Where do you want to start, Jim? Jim, you were just recently on. Remind me your name again. Rachel
Blevins, and
Rachel
then
Blevins.
earlier in the week, I was with Kim Iverson. Hey, look, I've got a soft spot for being interviewed by cute girls, and you're the big exception. What can I say? What can I say?
This is less of a conversation, less of an interview, more of a conversation.
That's true. Yes,
we're just two aging like fine wine, gentlemen. By the way, he is risen.
Yeah, truly is risen.
This is the last week.
Last day, I guess. Actually, tomorrow, Wednesday, day before Ascension, is the last day we say Christ is risen. Well, today for you.
I am on the last day. You are within targeting distance of the last day.
Penultimate day, yes.
For those who don't know, this is the official end of Pascha. Was 40-day fast, and we get a nice little month of reprieve and feasting post Pascha. So fasting will commence yet again very soon. Yay!
Yay.
But we'll get to that as well. We'll get to some conversation about Rokor, or the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. Of course, we have the BBC to thank for highlighting Buck Johnson, who's in the chat, a friend of the show. Father Moses and Father John Whiteford have been named by the BBC in terms of manliness in the Russian Orthodox Church. But
Father Joseph Gleason too.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, very briefly at the very end. I don't know if they want to tangle with him. I think that breaks paradigms. But as I was reading that article, I was immediately thought about how they treated the Ukrainian canonical church, and how this might spell some tough times for all things Rokor, all things Orthodox. I think the Greeks will, of course, abandon ship and scapegoat as they might.
Actually, it's even worse than that, given how close Constantinople is to elements of the U.S. government and how on board they are with the whole program in Ukraine to promote the schismatic church and to persecute the canonical church. I could easily see them whipping on elements of the U.S. government who domestically want to crack down on these the bad orthos, not the good orthos. And after all, I did see that President Trump appointed Archbishop Epilephoros to some kind of a religious freedom commission or some kind of advisory group. That doesn't give me a lot of comfort in terms of what his priority may be.
Jim, if you show up at the White House and you give him a nice big gold cross, what do you expect? Of course, you're going to get some gifts. That's a nice little gift. You gave the gold cross. Now you get a nice little place.
That's right. I forgot. He's a transactional president, right?
You're right. Exactly. Yeah. It's transactions all over the place.
Is that what they call pay to play?
Well, as I've told people many times before, when in Greece, never buy a goat from a man named Stavros, because his name is not Stavros, and that is not a goat.
Other than that, it's a great deal.
Who could say no? All right.
No. So anyway, there's a lot going. You're right. That article was interesting. I had not seen it. It's funny. There was a big New York Post article a while back about young men becoming Orthodox, and that got huge attention. But this one, which actually was much more detailed and much more focused on the whole Russian thing, I hadn't seen it all until you sent it to me.
I'm just trying to find it here. We'll pull it up for the second half of the show for people who want to stick around. I'll find it.
Sure.
We can go through the whole. We can go through it all because I think it's worth talking about. And then of course I have plans to reach out to. Oh, that's why that's happening. I have plans of reaching out to Father Moses and Father John Whiteford. Of course, with Buck Johnson, I've already talked to. Possibly talking to Father Turbo. And maybe Cyprian for getting on for guests of the show coming up. So we'll talk about that after we're done here. Also, when we're done here, folks, if you stick around, we'll be transferring you right over to a members only stream. You can buy memberships over on YouTube, $2, will get you into the very minimum Miron Chads membership. And of course, there's a $25 Excelsior group for those who really want to show their support. We have a membership goal. We have a support goal of 1,000 USD. We're trying to hit by the end of the month to keep Mrs. Mironchuk happy, which we always need to do. And keep the lights on, literally. So please send us your super chats. I'll read them out as they come in or at the end of the show. It was a great way of supporting the show is also by sending it directly through PayPal. That way it doesn't get the 30% haircut that YouTube likes to do to us. If you're listening here on Spotify, I will add the members-only chats over on the subscription over on Spotify. That's $10. You can join us there. And also on Substack, I'll be putting those all up so people can support the show in any way which you can. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Okay, Jim, I'm going to sometimes big screen you. I don't know. Last week with Matt, he got a little bit. Yeah, I know. I'm just preparing you. Okay, let's start with this. Reports coming out of the Kremlin and out of Western media that Putin was visiting a region. Kursk. Thank you. Putin was visiting Kursk, and apparently his helicopter was targeted or was going to be targeted by a Ukrainian drone swarm that the Russians knocked down.
Right.
Thousands of, and that it was the preamble to Russia's response, which is to literally blow up everything they can with just a gazillion trillions of drones. We don't know the exact number, but a lot of them, targeting, of course, Kiev and Odessa and many other major cities and facilities. On paper, it looks really fantastic. Ooh, shock and awe. In actuality, it's doing very little other than blowing up a whole bunch of people and adding to the casualty list. So I would like to get your initial thoughts on the drone swarm attacks, and then we can get into more of the responses that have been happening both by the Russians and by NATO.
Well, there are all sorts of questions, of course. I mean, when Trump spoke about these attacks on the Ukrainian cities, people being killed, et cetera, I mean, as far as I've seen, the reports on the civilian casualties are pretty minimal, which you would expect if they're targeting, accurately legitimate military target. But obviously, there are going to be civilians killed. I guess a couple questions occur to me. First off, Trump evidently did not know that there had been some very large Ukrainian strikes on Moscow airports, other infrastructure, that in the days preceding, and that this was a Russian retaliation. That also begs the question. Some people say, oh, look, this is the opening salvo of some big Russian offensive coming. Why would it have to be then in retaliation for something the Ukrainians did if it's something you would do in the normal course of military business anyway? If in fact you are planning an offensive, which everybody keeps talking about, and I don't know if there actually will be one. Maybe there will be one. We'll talk about that later, I guess, when we get to Kharkov. The other thing is that people are asking is that if Putin was being targeted here, how would the Ukrainians have the intelligence? And in other words, how would they know that that's where Putin was likely to be, and that they would be able to launch this attack without help from the United States or one of the other supporters of Ukraine? Because I don't think the Ukrainian intelligence is sophisticated enough on its own to do that. And the other thing is, and I think more people are asking this question now, how dumb is Putin? I mean, why would he be going to Kursk in a way that could be possibly expose him to that? Is he that naive to think that the Ukrainians might not want to try to kill him? So there's a lot of questions about this, and I don't know the answer to them. Maybe other people do.
Yeah, so I have many thoughts on this. So we get into conspiracy territory really easily with this, but I was just thinking about this morning. So the standard. Let's just assume that this is true. Right. First assumption that Putin was visiting the Kursk region. His location was detected, and there was a drone swarm. Right. Typically, and we have seen various reports, even with, let's say, Russian officials that have been assassinated and whatever have you, that the first thing out of the Kremlin is to deny it. They would deny it completely, because obviously it's showing up that they have a hole in their defenses, that something's gone wrong. And that's not something that the Russians are typically known to admit freely. So, first thing is that I would expect that if it was true, absolutely 100% true, the first response of the Kremlin would be to deny it, not to admit to it. And they have admitted to it. In fact, they admitted to it. Let me see if I can show this on the screen. We should be able to.
They've admitted that it appeared his helicopter was targeted.
Oh, yeah. And they made a big deal out of saying that they have knocked down all these things. So let me just see if we can show this.
Which is a very nice thing to make a big deal out of, but it really begs the question of why allow that kind of danger to exist in the first place. I mean, what are they thinking?
So this is out of an account called "Ignorance: The Root of and Stem of All Evil." Take this with all bags of salts. During Vladimir Putin's visit to the Kursk region, Ukrainian Nazis launched an unprecedented drone attack while the Russian president's helicopter was in the air. Anti-aircraft gunners shot down 46 aircraft-type drones. The commander of the Air Defense Division, whose area of responsibility is the region, told Vesti Nedley in an interview. So here's the interview. Let me know if you can hear this, Jim. Otherwise, there is transcripts. I'll read them along as we go. So it starts off with between the 20th and the 22nd of May, the enemy attempted. To launch a massive strike using fixed wings unmanned aerial vehicles against the territory of the Russian Federation. During this period, air defense systems destroyed 1,177 enemy unmanned aerial vehicles. And during this attack, the president of Russia was working with the Kursk region. I'll just do this. That's absolutely right. While the president was working in the Kursk region, the enemy launched an unprecedented drone attack. The air defense group in that area destroyed 46 fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles. And it goes on to say in the Kursk region directly borders Ukraine. Due to the short distance, the enemy's choice of possible strike weapons increases. And due to the approach time of drones, on the contrary, decreases. But even in such a complex operation environment, the air defense units worked in a coordinated manner. Effectively and with exceptional reliability. I want to put, this is going back again to the air defense officer. I want to point out that the intensity of the attack during the flight of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's aircraft over the Kursk region increased significantly. That's why we're simultaneously engaged in an air defense battle and ensured the safety of the president's helicopter in the air. The mission was accomplished. Okay. So, I don't know about you. No, maybe it's a delivery. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's the. I'm reading from a script delivery that I've memorized, and I'm petrified of making a mistake. Kind of look in his eyes, right? That very trained Russian. What, me nervous? Not me nervous, comrade. It's you're the one who is nervous. Maybe it's all that. Maybe it's Maybelline. I don't know. But something about this just reeks like this is a high degree of BS, because even from the reports, like, oh, they launched this offensive, but don't worry, our superior air defense knocked them all down.
Yeah.
So even if we're saying this is true, then the only reason the Russians are saying this is saying, yeah, sure, there was a hole in defenses, but we knocked them down. Don't worry, we got you. I don't know, man. I've been following this for too long. Maybe I'm just too far into this.
Are you saying maybe the whole story is phony? Is that what you're thinking?
Far be it from me, Jim.
Well, hang on a second. Let's run with that. What would be the purpose of? Other than touting the effectiveness of the air defenses, what would be the purpose of it, unless they wanted to use that as a pretext for something they want to do now? And what would that thing be?
Yeah, I think that's really it. Is that it is a pretext. Now, that's not saying that Ukraine is not launching drones on their own. We know that they are. We know that they are doing offensives. So
right.
And they've also stylized the narrative that Ukraine's not going to say they didn't do that. Right? Did they? I haven't heard any rebuttal from the Ukrainian side.
I haven't heard any denial from the Ukrainians. No.
Right. So obviously, but I haven't heard them confirm it either.
No.
Oddly enough, I think they're just letting the story lie.
Well, they're not. I find it hard to believe that Kiev would come out and say, "Yep, we tried to kill him, all right." I can't really see that.
See, I kind of see that they would, though, because I would think that Zelensky would say that, yeah, we almost got you. Look, when the Nord Stream pipeline got blown up, there was a lot of celebrations about that from very curious sites. There were certainly they certainly weren't shy about claiming responsibility for drone striking Russian generals and officials. I mean, Russia apparently
let me ask you a question then.
Sure.
Because they also remember they sent drones at the Kremlin too, and if the Ukrainians could kill Putin, do you think they would do it?
Absolutely.
So why is Zelensky still alive?
Very good question.
I agree with you. I think that if the Ukrainians could kill Putin, they would do it, and I think the Russians know that they would do it. And at the same time, the Russians can kill Zelensky anytime they want, yet they don't do it. Why not?
But can they though?
Sure, no question. Remember, early in the war, in fact, right at the beginning of the war, basically the entire Ukrainian government decamped and went to Lvov, and there was talk they would actually move out of Ukraine entirely because they assumed the Russians would come in, shock and awe, occupy the whole country, and then we could, bleed them to death in an Afghanistan type war and stuff like that. And then what it turned out, they didn't do that. And then when they had the little pullback from Kiev, by which they were rewarded by the Bucha provocation, and then, of course, the failed peace talks in Istanbul, in a sense, everything in Ukraine went back to normal in terms of the functioning of the government. All the government ministries, the presidential administration, the Verkhovna Rada, all the rest of it operate as though there were no war. And then you have all these people like, Boris Johnson and later Starmer and Macron and all these other dweebs coming to Kiev by train. It's admittedly by train, not by air, but they're coming to Kiev as if there's no problem. And at least implicitly, and I think in some cases explicitly, the Russians gave them assurance that they would not attack them. Now, their intelligence is good enough. Their signals intelligence is good enough. They have a pretty good idea where this guy is most of the time. And they've got the missiles that, of course, like Oreshnik, or they wanted to destroy him with a missile. I bet they could. They might miss him once or twice, but not too many times before he had to leave the country if he wanted to stay alive. Or he doesn't stay alive. In other words, I think they could just kill him if they wanted to, but they don't.
Well, okay, let's walk this through a little bit. So, okay, let's say the Russians, Canadian healthcare, Zelensky through poison coke or who knows what, right? We don't
have to be cute about this. A missile will do the job. You don't have to be overt.
We're on YouTube, Jim. We gotta say things, but not say things.
I'm just talking about ends and means. You don't have to get cute with
But the Russians like getting cute sometimes. Sometimes they like a little bit of you get a little bit of radiation poisoning.
Okay, let's suppose they decide to solve the presidential succession problem in Ukraine with extreme prejudice.
Right. Okay. So they do this. Then the question, sorry, Scouts Courier says radioactive butt plugs. Yeah, that would do her. You might take out Macron at the same time. You never know.
There's a mental image I could do with that.
If his wife doesn't do it before him, like Macron's got more security issues with his wife than he does against Russia at this point. Anyways, so okay. We'll make the assumption, right? So somehow Zelensky is no longer president of Ukraine.
Right.
Does it change anything?
No, not directly. I mean, see, that's the thing. And that's why I'm saying I don't think it's just a question of Zelensky himself, but the highest structures of the Ukrainian government have been basically left untouched. And this is the way I put it in my discussion with Rachel today. War is politics by their means. It's a state fighting a state, although in the case of the Ukrainian state, it's a puppet state that's a proxy for Western powers. But nonetheless, it's got a state structure, it's got an army and all that.
Yeah.
The Russians are degrading, actually killing off in large numbers the muscle of the Ukrainian state. All those poor schmoes they stick in uniform and send out to the front to die. But the arteries, like, for example, the bridges over the Dnieper, or the brains, the command and control and the structures of the Ukrainian state are being left untouched. Why is that? I mean, if you're trying to stop a state's ability from waging war, why are you not targeting the brains and the arteries of that state rather than just chopping away at its muscles?
Well, okay, so here's a counter question then. Would removing Putin from leadership change anything for Russia?
Well, actually, I think it would. I think basically he's probably the most moderate, pro-Western, cautious guy in the whole Russian establishment, and I think that's his natural inclination. And I think that's why he's feeling increasing pressure from people who want to prosecute this war as though they intended to win it, not as though they intended to force the other side to meet their terms in a diplomatic setting. And I think if they were to kill him, the gloves would come off. It would be Katie bar the door then.
So, I mean, Scouts Courier says here, I think the Russians might be waiting on the Ukrainians to turn on Zelensky.
Why? Why bother?
Well, hang on, but let's just entertain the notion.
Yeah.
But again, even if Azov turns around and marches their legions on, has a Julius Caesar moment that crosses the Dnieper and seizes Kiev, I don't see how that changes anything, because really the command center is not in Kiev. It's not even Lvov. It's in the city of London and maybe in Paris and many other places.
Yeah.
So really, Russia's war is with the West, is not with.
Well, you see, again, all the more puzzling in this, to me anyway, is that you've got a puppet regime that's basically a tool of those other governments, notably London. I agree with you on that. And also, to a great extent, also is hostage to all the goons with the guns, Azov and Pravy Sector and those guys, who are also, by the way, not suffering either. I mean, they're basically the ones who in the press gangs rounding up the poor schmoes to go send them off to die. And the Russians are killing those poor schmoes, but they're not killing the creeps who are sending them.
Weirdly enough, the worst they're kind of in this weird paradox where the worse that the Ukraine does, the better it is for the forced recruitment. Yeah, because the more men die, well, the more men we need. So let's plug in. And this again,
apparently they get a bounty, like $200, $400 for each poor schmo they rope in.
Right. Let's play big giant suppose. Right. What ifs? This is what you're not going to get on the Duran. You're not going to get on Rachel. And all these people are great, and this not casting shade, but this is the thing that you come to our channel for, because we're gonna do some big giant supposes and try to fill it in with what we know. Okay. So let's say the suppose here is that Russia is not trying to knock out key infrastructure in Ukraine, which seems to be true. They're not knocking out bridges. They're not knocking out, as you said, they're not knocking out, going after political figures. They're not doing the things that even if Russia was really unchained would do.
And I would make a distinction between infrastructure, bridges, and rail lines and things like that, roads, versus human infrastructure, if you want to call it that,
Sure.
the personnel, the key personnel of the Ukrainian state, without which there is no state.
Right. So they're bleeding out. They're bleeding out the populace.
Right.
Both sides are doing this. Right. So it seems like a human sacrifice ritual, essentially.
Yeah, and of course it's very lopsided in the Russians' favor, but it's still a lot more Russian. A lot of Russians dying too. Nowhere near the number as the number of Ukrainians dying, but it's not. It's no picnic.
It doesn't matter if it's one. It's 1 to 500. The fact is that Russia still has negative birth rates. So even if you're doing the math, saying, okay, well, look, we're going to replenish our overall birth rates, our overall population numbers when we take over these oblasts, and we're going to add those populations onto our own. Sure, accounting levels, that's true, but that doesn't fix your birth rate issue. And if you're under replacement level birth rates, sacrificing a whole generation of young men, even 10% of them, we're going to do a small number, is still a massive number of people that you can't afford to lose right now. I would say this is my corollary to a lot of people saying there's world war going on. I'm not saying that the elites or any one government won't trigger something. I'm simply saying that it's literally suicide. It is civilizational suicide.
And I think that's key there, Jason, because when all's said and done, these people are Rus. They're Orthodox Rus people on both sides. It's like if some ghoul was watching the American Civil War and saying, well, yeah, they're all killing each other and they're Yankees and they're rebels, but they're all Americans. And it's a win-win from their point of view. And I think there are some people looking at this that way as well. Who cares? Ukrainians are expendable and Russians are evil. What's not to love?
Let's keep in mind, though, of course, I've had a lot of Catholics who've been saying this to me, like, oh, look at this, orthos versus orthos. And like, well, to be fair, while Russia is an Orthodox state under Putin, and there has been a massive uptick towards the Orthodox Church, formerly in Russia, in Ukraine, that's not the case. So in Ukraine, the vast majority of the population is still somewhere between agnostic and atheist. Now, there is, of course, a massive Orthodox population there compared to other places in the world, but I mean, that's not really saying much. And as we're seeing what the attacks on the canonical church by Zelensky and co, by recruiting, by basically kidnapping priests and putting them on the front lines, they're pretty determined to eradicate that church from existence in Ukraine, which is a crime of I can't even describe
in any country of whatever religion, and it's going to vary from country to country. Some people are religious and some people are not. And even the ones who are not religious, who don't go to church, the church they're not going to is the Orthodox Church, because that's the religion and the civilization that they belong to. And but maybe if they don't go to church, somebody in their family does. A lot of them were baptized, even if they didn't go to church after that. I mean, they're still Orthodox people, culturally, historically.
Sure.
There's identity, even if they're not necessarily churchgoers or believers.
I mean, I've said on the show now pretty repeatedly that I actually think Christianity becomes genetic at some point, where there's almost like I don't want to mix terms, but you understand, like it's epigenetic, where it becomes like an inheritable trait that permeates both culture and families and individuals, that even even Western atheists who are going to take aims against, let's say, the structure of the church, don't realize that the things that they would defend, such as common law, is only possible because of Christianity. Like you don't get British common law structures without Christianity. It's impossible.
Exactly. It's like you go to graveyards in that part of the world, and you notice they have like tables and chairs built into them, where people go there after Pascha for Radonitsa to have a meal with their dead relatives. I noticed sometimes in Russia, you have a grave with a red star on it and a hammer and sickle. Obviously, somebody was not a believer, was a communist, but it still has the table and chairs built into it, so that on the appropriate religious holiday, people come and visit him or her. And it's not as simple as people think it is. Sometimes, believer, not believer. Well, as they say, there are no atheists and foxholes. I think a lot of these guys on the front, who maybe they're never particularly religious, have found some close encounter with God before they, unfortunately, many of them meet him face to face because of the war.
Here's a complete side quest. We'll get back to Russia Ukraine stuff, but I don't know if you did you see any of Jordan Peterson's recent Jubilee debate thing where he's in the middle of a circle of people who rush to the center and debate him on things, and
no, I didn't say that. No.
Okay, well, you didn't really miss much, but one of the debaters, young guys, try to get him on this idea of worship and what does worship mean.
Yeah,
and I forget the exact quotes that Peterson said. I think he said something along the lines of intention, something else, and sacrifice, and that which you would be willing to die for. Right? That's that's his definition of belief, and worship is a little bit different. The terminology that I know that I think is most agreeable is the idea that worship is what we give our attention to. So anything we give our attention to with basically, and then you can have higher forms of it by giving our intention to the attention is a form of worship. So we can worship technology or people or everything else.
Money.
These are all right. The thing that separates the worship of God is a higher principle, right? It's the intention behind it and all the things that carries out. Yeah. So when
because in that case, it's not just a something; it's a somebody.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And also a set of forms. So it's informing you. This is really what it gets down to phronema, right? A state of being. The essence of unknowing to get to a state of being, just to be. Which is not thinking about it, you're just doing it. So it's integration completely into the form. That's the way to have a true phronema. When we look at these conflicts, because these conflicts are inherently spiritual, especially when you take something like a civil war, really between two peoples, who the differential between Ukrainian and Russian, I know, and like. I've come 180s on a lot of these things as a former Ukrainian nationalist. Still pretty much a Ukrainian nationalist. I like to see Ukrainians not dying. That would be a good thing.
Me too.
But I also now fervently believe that the only future for Ukrainians, right, is within the body of Russia or Novorossiya or whatever structure they're going to come out with it.
Right.
That being pawns of the West.
There was the one that's had virtually all of their history ever since the Poles and Swedes were sent packing.
Exactly, but I would even extend that to the Poles, Lithuanians, Estonians, all the rest of it. If you're Slavic right now, your best bet is with Russia.
Yeah,
and that is an incredibly hard, bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah,
but it seems to be true because NATO and the West do not care about you. They will sacrifice you and your entire generations in order to win a headline war.
Yeah.
And that's all this is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of. Yeah. That's you're on the stuff. I don't know if I ever told you, one of my back in the early 1980s, when I was at the Soviet desk of the State Department, one of my Russian language teachers at the Foreign Service Institute was a very, very ardent Ukrainian nationalist. His name was Yuri, and he lived and breathed Ukrainian nationalism. And in fact, for him, Russians and Ukrainians were not just two different nations; they were genetically different. They were different races in his mind. And I remember one time I met his brother, and I didn't know much about these topics back then. And I said, "Hey, your brother Yuri," he says, "Blah blah blah. What do you think about all that?" And he says, "Me, I'm Russian." I'm saying, how can two guys in the same family, one be Russian, the other one say we're genetically different from the Russians? Is he genetically different from his brother? It's sort of like again, I have a lot of, especially here in Virginia, we had a very nice Confederate Memorial Day yesterday at the cemetery, and there were some very strong Southern partisans. We have nothing in common with the damn Yankees. We're different civilization, different nation, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some truth to that. But Stonewall Jackson's sister was an ardent unionist. So, I mean, whatever the ethnic differences are, linguistic differences, there's also just a huge political difference that really, I think, is kind of the heart of the thing. This is slowly falling apart, but I inherited this. Wow. This is the family Bible. This is from my Ukrainian side. And every good
Orthodox family has the family Bible they passed down. So this is my family Bible that I inherited.
Is it in Ukrainian or Slavonic?
It's in Russian. It's in Slavonic. It's
Uh-huh.
in so I can show you a little bit. Sorry, it is falling apart, but
Oh my goodness.
right.
Yeah, I really can't see the print. Yeah. Look at the title page. Where's the title page?
Here we go. I don't know if you can see that.
No, I can't.
No, it's a little bit.
No.
I can show you maybe off the stream, but and also a prayer book,
Uh-huh.
which you can see there.
That's in Russian, I think.
Yeah, no, of course it's all in Russian.
Yeah.
Now Ukrainians
Yeah,
will say
the old orthography too, it looks like.
yeah, and this my Ukrainian family came over. My grandfather was born in 1916. Things get a little bit sketchy about when the family came over, but it was basically around that time, right? So in Canada, there was a big recruitment of Eastern Europeans, mostly from Ukraine, to come over to settle in the West, specifically in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. Even now, there's a massive Ukrainian population still left over in Manitoba. That was famously where the Ukrainian language was held, because even after the annexation of Catherine the Great and a few other laws prohibiting certain languages and cultural norms and et cetera, they fled to the West, and that's where they settled. So I bring all this up because that's all in Russian. My grandparents spoke Russian. While we were still considered Ukrainian, and we understood that we came from Ukraine, our ethnos was Russian, Eastern European, whatever. There weren't these terms before. These terms got adopted. It's also why you find I think some people are very mystified when they hear about, especially that generation who came over and lived through basically World War I and World War II. In World War I in Canada, many Slavics were shipped off to concentration camps, Great Slav Lake in Manitoba and many other places. Why? Because it was part of the. They were called. I forget the term right now. Anyways, basically the idea was that they could be traitors to the state, right? Same thing that happened in the U.S. with the Japanese, right? So Japanese and German camps.
But who were you at war with that they would have been considered?
Hungary. They were called hunkies. So that was a term. So hunkies, right, were anything that was vaguely Eastern European.
Because they were people from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, even though they were Eastern Slavs. They said, "Oh, you're from an enemy nation." So okay, I got it.
Could possibly be holding Hungarians within your midst.
Yeah.
So you all got to go. You go to the concentration camp, work camp, holding pen.
So when they crossed the lake with them, was that on a hunky dory?
Yes. and that carried forward. So many people of that generation try to hide their heritage as much as they could. Yeah. I wasn't brought up with the language. I was, you had some cultural things because hey, if there's a pierogi on the table, we're eating it. But but there was this great shame in the West about your own heritage. Wow. And that permeates through to a lot of Eastern Europeans in I think in America, less so with the Poles and the Czechs and the rest of it, but certainly with the Russians and Ukrainians. I say all this because when we get into these discussions of culture and who is what and Kiev Rus versus Muscovite Rus, these are false terms. These are terms that are being created really post 1992. Well,
like all those terms too, like Rusin, Rus, Ruthenian, all these. So and people use them like very definite denominators when in fact they're terms of art. In terms of where they apply and to whom they apply. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so this false dichotomy of culture has been created, and certainly in the Ukrainian nationalist schools, there was a big drive to say that no, we are separate people. There are Russians and there are Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And well, to give the devil his due, there
Mm-hmm.
are a subsect. There is a genetic difference of
Mm-hmm.
people who occupied areas that are now that would be considered Ukraine.
Yeah,
That
like
are
especially West Ukraine.
right, that are
Yeah,
genetically different,
yeah, yeah,
and that gives us also gives an inside track of why they want this conflict to continue and want to extinguish as many young Ukrainian men, young and old Ukrainian men
yeah.
as possible. And I think
Yeah,
that
and I think it's
plays
sad that some Russians have fallen for this too. That they basically said, well, the Ukrainians used to be our brothers, but they brought this on themselves. They chose this, and I always say, when did they choose this? They didn't vote for this. I mean, what, half of 1% of the population was on the Maidan, and that's the choice of all Ukrainians that they need to now pay for, or they voted for Poroshenko against the more warlike Timoshenko, and because he was comparatively the peace candidate when he ran, and of course Zelensky ran explicitly as a peace candidate. People voted for peace. I mean, when did Ukrainians ever choose this fate? And of course they say, well, they're still obeying this government. Show me which people under an oppressive government ever really rebel against it. That doesn't happen. I mean, what are they supposed to do exactly?
well, because people have this what I call Saturday morning cartoon logic when it comes to these kind of conflicts, where they think, and you see this reverberated on social medias all the time, like, oh, we're going to rise up and do something. Like, well, if you're going to do it, you just do it. You wouldn't be typing it out. You'd be doing it actively.
No,
do you understand?
No.
You would be actively engaged in the act of rebellion. So the fact that you're talking about these things, and it's very nice and easy to say, well, they should do this and that and the other thing. It's like they're being slaughtered. And we read out those reports of Ukrainians trying to get out of being forcibly recruited.
Oh, you've seen those videos. They're horrible. Yeah.
Absolutely.
They're horrible. Did you see that one that was on what's her name? Panchenka. I forget her first name. She posted one with this guy where they slammed his head into the concrete while trying to recruit him, and they obviously did some kind of damage because he's just lying there, blood everywhere, twitching like a and I guess they figured, well, this has got a little breakage here, so we'll just walk away, and maybe the guy died. I don't know, but it's just horrible what they're doing, and like I say, the people doing it are not being held responsible. All the killing that's being done by the Russian army isn't targeting the goons in the press gangs. It's targeting the poor fellows that they're recruiting.
So let's look at this from the Russian side. Let's just share this briefly because we'll get back on track. Hang on a second here. So this is a report out of Sky News. Sky News reports that more than 50,000 Russian troops have started amassing at the border with Ukraine near Kharkiv, including several elite formations. An attempt to break through Ukraine's defensive lines and advance towards the Ukraine's second largest city could be imminent. So, for audio listeners, you won't be able to see this, but we're sharing a screen of the map. Essentially, these forces would be amassing just south of Belgrade, near the Pinsky and thank you. With the idea of mobilizing south towards Kharkiv. Now we were talking about this before we pressed play, Jim, and this is constantly what I've been telling people. Early on, people are asking, why isn't Russia doing this and that, the other thing? I'm like, well, part of the reason is that even if they're claiming land, they're claiming land in farmland. So it's flat, exposed land. If you're fighting this fourth dimensional war with drones and all the rest of it, standing out in the open doesn't do you any good. So so Russia's advances have always been basically advancing to some sort of natural border or something that they can fully control, and then build defenses in. Now, this isn't a defense of the Russian plan. It makes sense, right? I'm trying to make sense of what the hell they're doing. So to your point, if they take Kharkiv, great. They're taking the second largest city in Ukraine, right? Maybe it's a death blow, maybe it's not. Odessa would be a much more formidable. Basically, if Russia takes Odessa, the war is over. Like Ukraine is over; it's finished. Taking Kharkiv, it's not nothing, but they exposes them. Now they have this massive flank that they have to then defend. So unless we don't know something in terms of how weak the Ukrainian lines are, or how many people they have to throw at this thing. Taking Kharkiv doesn't do anything unless they're going to march right into Kiev. Anyway, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. Like I said, I think it would be foolish for them to launch an attack on Kharkov rather than just simply try to cut it off from the rest of Ukraine. Again, I don't want to go too far on a limb on this, because what I think doesn't carry a whole lot of weight in terms of somebody who actually has real military expertise. It's just, like I said, but one thing I will say, I've asked many people, including a lot of Russians and Ukrainians, about the bridges, and nobody has ever given me a good answer about that. Now, look, even when we talk about these advances, like into the Kharkov region and so forth, Sumy region, people are still talking in terms of, well, it's not a big aerial offensive, but they're still talking in terms of territorial control and objectives. And a lot of people have said, well, the Russians don't really care about that so much. What they really want to do is just keep grinding down Ukrainian forces. Their real goal is to destroy the Ukrainian army by killing as many Ukrainians as possible. That seems to be their strategy so far. So maybe even the question of advancing on Kharkov, advancing on Sumy, making a thrust toward, maybe none of that matters to their military strategy at this point. It's just more in terms of, well, killed another 1,000 Ukrainians today. Well, we killed 2,000 today. Maybe that's the way they're approaching it, with, as they say, an economy of force, an economy of losses on the Russian side. I don't know, but that appears to be what they're doing.
Right.
And by the way, let's talk about how devastating this is. I mean, I agree with McGregor and Daniel Davis and a few other people that the Ukrainians probably have lost about 1.5 million dead in this war. And this is in a country that I don't think there's 20 million people left in the area controlled by Kiev right now. And, that's 1/10 of the American population in 1970 during the Vietnam War. Can you imagine if we were losing 10,000 men a day in Vietnam? If we were losing 70,000 men in a week, which is more than we lost in the whole war, what that would have done to our country? That's the kind of carnage that Ukraine is suffering. And, there was somebody else today, I think, it was Pepe Escobar. He was saying that it's clear now there will not be a negotiated settlement to this war. And I agree with him. So the war will continue, but that means the war will not end in 2025 or even in 2026. It will just go on and on and on. Well, how can that be? I don't see how that could be.
So hang on. I think now that is possibly the reason why, right? At least from one side, we'll leave the Russians' intentions on over here, okay, right? Okay. Because it looks, at least now, it looks like that the Russians are now getting serious, and they're trying to bring an end to this. Well, the title of this episode essentially is, Putin strikes back. Will Putin end this war now? Right. Because he has the power to decisively end this war.
I think he does.
He could send hypersonic missiles into Kiev and many other places right now and end this war definitively. Right?
That's what we were talking about earlier. That's what I think. In other words, I think he could decapitate the regime. I mean, remember, we hear this all the time with regard to North Korea, Iran, decapitation strikes, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, look what the Israelis did to the Hezbollah leadership. Again, it's not a magic bullet. It's not a magic wand, but you can do a lot of damage to a political organization, and a government is a political organization, and they're not doing it.
Let's apply a few things that you've said on this show before. That Russia's in here. Russia thought they were doing some horse trading. They thought this was going to be a limited engagement. This is why they didn't go full ham at the very first. They get multiply betrayed. There's multiple pleads towards sanity deals and all the rest of it. At the same time, Russia is now building up relations with the global South. This gets us. Actually, this is a good off-road to talk about the new sanctions threat. Yeah. We're coming up to the end of it, because I think this is a major key point that people are sleeping on. Because you hear all these things, right? Where like, Lindsey Graham is now threatened. He threatened before 500%. I think is the number, which is like, why not 1 million? Why not 300%? Why 500? Well, that's what his think tank said was a good number to say. So the new threat is a 500% tariff on all countries that do any business with Russia at all. right? To buy oil and gas and Russian goods. I guess caviar is off the table as well. Fine. What's crazy about this is that, okay, let's just even say this is possible, which is near impossible to do, but let's just say let's just say it's possible.
Okay.
That creates a direct and immediate rivalry, and we know this because other countries have spoken up about this, namely China and India, who've told people, like, if you do this, now you have a problem with us, because Russia supplies massive amounts of oil and gas to China and in India and the global South, and also you would spike energy prices to economy crushing levels. Automatically, the price of oil and gas internationally, globally, would become so high that no country would be able to afford it, even if you're producing it overnight. So it doesn't make any sense. It's either an empty threat, as which you've seen with the EU promising sanctions against Russia, which never materialized because they don't have the balls to do it, or they are going to do this and purposely tank the world economy. It's take your pick at this point, or use this as a preemptive to World War III.
I think there's something in between. I think they could enact it and then enforce it in a spotty and ineffective and inconsistent manner. In other words, that they have it on the books, they take targets of opportunity, but they don't actually do enough enforcement to actually crash everything, like you said. I mean, I don't know. That's just another thought that occurs to me. But by the way, but that bill has 80 co-sponsors in the Senate now. Now, I mean, that's way more than veto-proof majority. I'm just looking now to see if there's a companion bill in the House of Reprehensibles
explain that. Explain that to me, Jim. Because I mean, you've been inside that machine. So
right,
what does all that mean? Me being Canadian living in Australia, I don't know. I don't know shit from Shinola on some level. So like
from down under and up over. It's
the great reach around, Jim.
Well, as you know, there are two houses of Congress, right? The Senate and the House of Reprehensibles. And in the Senate, there are 100 members and 435 in the House. And a bill to be enacted needs to be passed by both houses and then signed by the president, or it can be allowed to become law without his signature under certain circumstances. If a bill has enough supporters, they can override the president's veto. Now, that's by 2/3 majority in each house. 80 is 2/3 majority. That's 67 votes in the Senate. So they've got way more co-sponsors than they do for veto majority. In the House, I don't know. Now, the House, the Republican leadership under Mike Johnson, they want to support Ukraine, and so do most of the Republicans at this point, and virtually all the Democrats. So if the bill ever got to the floor of the House, I think it would pass with a very wide margin, probably with a veto-proof majority. The question is whether politically Johnson can be persuaded by Trump not to bring the bill forward, because it would queer his political relationship with the White House.
So basically what you're saying here is that the president couldn't veto the bill if it passed.
If they get enough votes when they pass it. Now, sometimes they pass a bill with a veto-proof majority, and then the president vetoes it, and then when they do the veto override vote, some of the people who voted for the bill are persuaded not to vote for the override. Whereas they'll say, well, I voted for the bill, I think it's a good bill, but I'm not going to vote to overturn the president's veto. So that happens sometimes too. So even if they get a veto-proof majority vote to pass it, doesn't mean they will necessarily override his veto. But to tell the truth, a lot of these Republicans really hate Trump. Let's never forget that. People think, oh, it's a Republican Congress. Trump controls Congress. He does not control Congress.
What are your thoughts on that? Because the notables, of course, are Rand Paul and who's the other guy?
Tom Massey.
Tom Massey, thank you.
Yeah. Well, the reason they're notable is because they're such exceptions.
Right, but they've also built a much like Bernie Sanders for the Democrats. They built a brand of being the insider outsider. right?
Right.
Oh, they're really looking out for you.
Yeah.
They're looking out for
Yeah.
the common man. Sure, they're working with the system, but they have to because
Right.
it's a two-party system,
Well,
really.
and by the way, Jason, there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, you
Sure.
can be the outlier who never cooperates with anything, never votes for anything, which means you're never going to get nothing for, for example, your district or your state. So, yeah, I mean, there's, look, in every walk of life, there are some compromises you feel you can make and somewhere you need to fall on. You can't make, you have to fall on your sword. And the guy who falls on his sword for the first little thing, well, he's dead and he can't accomplish anything. And you might as well not bother. So it's, there is a judgment call there.
How many military bases or military industries are in Thomas Massey's district? That's a big question, I guess.
That I do not know. Now, I don't think Massey is the insider outsider. I think he's just plain outsider. I don't think he has that influence, because I think his tolerance of compromise of principle is pretty damn thin. And so, I don't think he's going to be much of a player on something like this.
Just briefly, Jim, part of the big beautiful bill that just got passed, essentially got passed, or isn't in the process of being passed. Yeah. Of course, is fulfilling one of Trump's big promises. I think it was his number 7 or 8 in his Agenda 47 statements, which is to build a big, giant, now golden dome across America. To protect against missile incursions and foreign invasions and who knows what. Of course, if you go over to go over to Gumroad and get your copy of Tales of the Shadow Empire, you hear me talking with Stormy Waters and then later on with Jim Jatras himself about the Carlyle Group's inclusion in this. This is a recreation. Trump's even said it in his little media package. This is the fulfillment of Reagan's promise.
Yeah.
To create this Iron Dome, now Golden Dome. It's a dome. It's a drone. It's a drone, as Matt Erickson and I have said, because I think it's going to be fulfilled with drones. Well,
it's a dome to protect against what? Flying illegal Mexicans? What are they going to shoot down with this dome? I mean, and by the way, what does it consist of anyway? More Patriot missiles? I mean, what kind of hardware is this being?
Did you see Trump's latest statement while Prince Charles is visiting Canada? Swearing in, helping to legitimize the new Canadian regime under Mark Carney. Trump has basically said, "Look, Canada can buy in to protection with this great golden dome for $61 billion USD. I'm assuming, which was like I don't know."
Yeah, we don't want Canadian dollars, no.
Right. Why would you? Canadians don't even want those dollars. What are you talking about? But
we're not loony.
Or they can become the 51st state and get included for free. It's a gimme.
By the way, I've seen some news stories, or at least some headlines. What's going on in Alberta?
I have no idea. I don't think Alberta's though.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, I thought there was some talk about they're going to secede or something like that.
Yeah. This has been a talking point for Alberta for a very long time. Ever since they found oil, they've been threatening to succeed. Ask Quebec, where I'm from, how that goes. By the way, and the mechanisms that the Canadian federal government has in play to dissuade people from even considering the possibility of sovereignty in their time. They
can't be anything compared to the mechanisms we had against secession back in 1861.
Well, look, we can speculate wildly. Maybe we'll get Matt Ehret back on the show to talk specifically about
there we go.
But and everyone should go check out that episode. By the way, it's done very well over on YouTube. Go check that out.
Okay.
And plans are to get Matt back on.
Well, he's great.
To talk more about this. Yeah, he's fantastic, and the response for that video has been great. It's a leverage point, right? So the premiers in Canada technically are like governors in America, technically, right? So technically, they do have sovereignty under this Dominion of Canada kind of concept. It's a formal, informal kind of arrangement where, formally they have this power, informally they don't, right? Yeah, because they're bought out and the mechanisms to succeed are beyond them. But I do think it's interesting to have that their people are having this conversation as a leverage point. I honestly think that when you're looking at the history,
Mhm.
I'm old enough to remember Meech Lake and things that brought down the Mulroney government, and that was all these conversations around specifically this idea of a unified North America, NAFTA, right, which became NAFTA under Clinton's and under Christian.
And the Amero and all that nonsense, yeah.
Sure, but this goes back into the 18th century. This goes even further back. This idea of unifying the Americas under a union, very much like the European Union. Mexico, America, and Canada becoming some sort of unified mass. Maybe now El Salvador is replacing Mexico. Who knows, right? But this is old talk, and it got derided for a bit, and now it seems to be back on the table because the old plan, the new old plan is being abandoned. So now the old plan is being represented as, hey, remember this? Well, we already have
there's a bright shiny thing.
Yeah, we all kind of agreed on this, anyways, kind of, didn't we? Let's do this again. Which is, Kanzuk was the other one, right? This is the newer form of this. You ever hear this? The Canadian, UK, Australian, New Zealand alliance of combining the Commonwealth, the main, sorry Caribbean, sorry Barbados, you're not included in this.
Is AUKUS kind of a step in that direction? That new U.S. Australia UK thing where they squeeze the French out with the submarine deal.
Yes, so many different acronyms. The same basic concept. I know. Sort of like Anglosphere.
Let's just say Five Eyes. Let's just say Five Eyes and be done with it.
I agree. Let's just call it the CIA. The CIA cutouts, right? The
MI6 cutouts.
Right. We didn't get
by the way, what is the Canadian CIA called?
It's called. I know this actually. It's called the. Hang on, Secret Service.
No, External Intelligence Service.
Well, the CSIS. So you have the Mounties, right? The Mounted Police.
Right. Well, that's like the FBI, though.
Yeah, it's like the FBI, but they also it gets murky, right? Because the Mounties also kind of secondary as Canada's CIA in many ways.
Oh, really?
But yes, CSIS is a civilian intelligence agency. So that's your.
Oh, I see. That distinguishes it from military intelligence.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But in Canada, these things are kind of conjoined. There's the lines between, let's say, the RCMP, CSIS, and the military police or military intelligence kind of get all combined in some sort of murky waters. It's like I think it really comes down to jurisdiction. It's very much like we'll get you talking to Charles Spadiel's maybe sometime. Charles Spadiel, famously a friend of the show, a friend of mine, worked for Homeland Security before it was Homeland Security. Also included in the Tales of the Shadow Empire package that people should be picking up. But yeah, that's sort of that weird murky waters of internal. I mean, you can talk about this, Jim. You were inside the beast, in the belly of the beast. Like, things get murky at some point. Like, whose jurisdiction is this? Yeah. We don't know. Let's just create a new entity. Well, if we don't know, now there's a new.
And I don't think yours are as well known as the American ones are. I mean, do even Canadians know the details of their intelligence and other structures?
CSIS became more well known, I think, the last maybe 10, 15 years. Again, for people who are paying attention, most Canadians are not paying attention at all. So CSIS is sort of like a term they hear on CBC News. People involved, don't worry, good governance, don't worry, relax, unless it's conservatives, then freak out. There's no real strong delineation about who's supplying what. Generally speaking, in most Canadian media, the RCMP takes front. So most of your
sense.
major, you'll see an RCMP agent.
Well, that's because Dudley
on
Do-Right had such a wholesome image, you know.
How could you? It's the chin, really. It's the,
Nell Fenwick.
That's what Mulrooney had. He had the chin.
Yeah.
With the dimple. It's like, how could you disagree with the chin with a dimple?
Yes.
All right. Do we want to spend a little time on Rocor before we start?
Yeah, let's do. Yeah, let's do.
Let me see
I'm glad you sent me that article. I had not seen it when it first came out on the BBC World News.
Let me just pull this up.
Especially since we know everybody in the article.
Yeah, we do actually.
Well, most of them.
I have not spoken to Father Moses, so
now, I haven't either. But I know Buck Johnson, of course. I know Father Joseph Gleason. I know Father John Whiteford, and I know who was the other one that was mentioned in the article. Somebody else. I don't know that guy. There's Buck. There was somebody else I mentioned.
Archpriest John. Sorry, that's John Whiteford.
That's Whiteford. Yeah, there's somebody else.
A wispy, beard-headed Texan. Oh, did I lose you, Jim? Father John Joseph Gleason. It sounds like I've lost Jim here on audio. Let me see if we can
say I'm in suspicious company. We freeze up.
No, you're good. Okay, so this is Father. So for people listening in on audio, we are seeing a picture of Father Moses McPherson, who's been making headlines. I'm surprised. It's been interesting. I don't know if you've been seeing the attack lines have been forming, specifically around Father Pierre Hears and Jay Dyer. The Catholic sphere is up in arms on these two gentlemen specifically, calling them out for being not Orthodox.
Yeah,
of course, there was also the case of the Orthodox nun, the Russian Orthodox Rocor nun, being excommunicated, and she's joining the ranks of the separatist church in Ukraine. So I'll just read out the headline, Jim, and I'll read through this and stop me where you want me to stop. The headline reads from the BBC. Lucy Ash is the reporter. Young U.S. men are joining Russian churches, promising absurd levels of manliness. Manlinessness.
Well, it is a quote. It is a quote from somebody, though. See, it's in quotation.
Sure. I mean, it might be a quote directly from Father Moses, who's absurdly manly. Like, look at the.
When did this article come out? Because on my screen it says 3 days. Okay.
Yeah, 3 days ago. Yeah. A lot of people ask me, Father Moses, how can I increase my manliness to absurd levels? In a YouTube video, a priest championing a form of virile, unapologetic masculinity. Skinny jeans, crossing your legs, using an iron, shaping your eyebrows, and even eating soup are among the things he derides as too feminine. I would say that I don't know. Well, who knows? I know I've said, quote from my grandfather, that wearing shorts are for women, children, and queers. I feel like this falls into this purview. So Father Moses and I have.
I'm a child.
You're too bearded to be feminine. These are the other videos of Father Moses McPherson, a powerfully built father of five, weightlifting to the sound of heavy metal. He was raised Protestant and once worked as a roofer, but now serves as a priest in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, Rocor, and Georgetown, Texas, an offshoot of the Mother Church in Moscow. Rocor, a global network with headquarters in New York, has recently been expanding across parts of the U.S., mainly as a result of people converting from other faiths. In the last 6 months, Father Moses prepared 75 new followers for baptism in his Church of the Mother of God just north of Austin. When my wife and I converted 20 years ago, we used to call the Orthodoxy the best kept secret because people just didn't know what it was, he says. But in the last year and a half, our congregation has tripled in size. And this is showing a picture of convert Theodore. I know that from personal experience here in Australia, the church I attend to Saint Mary of Egypt, has also been experiencing exponential growth. Now, to keep this in context, what exponential growth for most of these parishes mean is like 24 people. Like that's kind of where we're topping out here in Australia.
Go from 24 to 32, and that's a pretty decent percentage growth, but still pretty small.
Right, especially in a percentage of a population where we're talking like what really 1% of the population. So oftentimes what gets obscured in these reports, and I've read a few of them, is like, oh, it's this big boom. It's like, yeah, it's an increase in numbers, it's a doubling.
Yeah,
but we're talking about from like 6 people to 12 people to 24 people attending Sunday liturgy on the regular. We're not talking in the hundreds or thousands of people. Like we should keep this in context. It's both. I think it's important for the humbling nature of this as well. That while we're saying, glory to God, look at this increase, it's still humbling to know that these numbers are not, these mega churches, they're not comparable, which I think these reports kind of intentionally or unintentionally conflate. Because if you're used to seeing like, you say, oh, these massive numbers. Okay, well, are we talking stadiums? No, we're talking like a small, previously Anglican church that's been now converted and holds 24 people and is nearly kind of full at that point. Like there's not, like we're not shoulder to shoulder just yet, but we're talking a very small place. Are you experiencing the same thing in America, Jim?
Yeah, we are definitely. I mean, maybe on a somewhat larger scale. I mean, part of it depends on location, which population center you're near, that kind of thing. Like, the parish I go to is very near some military bases, so we tend to get a lot of young men inquiring from there. But it's it's going to vary from place to place.
Should we invite Buck on to talk about this? I think we should.
I think so. I mean, he's a star of the article there.
He's
by the way, I would like to note one thing in the article here that is sort of a sleeper that people may not be paying much attention to, is that you notice that they do like a little counterpoint by quoting a lady who belongs to a Greek parish in Austin. And she says, many converts belong to the anti-woke crowd and sometimes have strange ideas about their new faith, especially those of the Russian church. That's not her, that's the author. But then she says, they see it as a military, rigid, disciplinary, masculine, authoritarian religion. It's kind of funny. It's almost as if the old American Puritans and their craziness is resurfacing. Now, the reason I think this is interesting is that this is the only person in the article that is not a person who's of the negative depiction they're trying to make. This is a person pointing to it and saying, oh my, isn't this terrible? And of course, she belongs to a Greek parish. And I think this is unfortunately someplace points to some of the divisions we're having in our church, both in this country and in the world, where I think some of the people in the Greek church, in the Greek Archdiocese in America, and also the Constantinopolitan Patriarchate, the Ecumenical Patriarchate, are going to be first in line holding the torch in the lynch mob, coming after or trying to sick the authorities.
Absolutely.
On the Russian church and on ROKOR. I note, by the way, that President Trump recently appointed Archbishop Elpidophoros, or Elpidoktonos, as some of us call him, not the hope bearer, but the hope slayer, on this advisory board of religious leaders. Now, and look, this is somebody who's not only in communion with the schismatic church in Ukraine, but is cheering them on, even as their government is trying to crush the canonical church. I don't trust these people to be the arbiters of religious freedom when it comes to whatever the stage is being set here to go after, the anti-woke masculine Russian presence among us,
Yeah. Okay. Let's speak about that briefly, because again, I think that part of my overall prediction is that we're going to see this moving towards the neo-trads. Well, I've defined it as neo-trads, which is this mushy Christian center mass of people looking for general forgiveness,
Mhm.
Sins of the past, a return to some sort of tradition. The liberals will move back to 1995, which we're already seeing in fashion. Man, I see Jenko jeans and flares all over the place now. I know that seems like topical and nonsense, but it's an indication. I think you're going to see a mass return from the liberal side back to 1995, and the conservatives want to go back to 1955 at minimum. So we're going to see this kind of.
I want to go back to 955.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back to let's go back to 33. I mean,
let's
sure.
just go back to 55.
When did Byzantium fall? 1496. Let's go back to that.
By the way, I need to talk to you about Byzantium in a second. But look,
sure.
We'll wrap up with that maybe.
But hang on. The Buck, the invite has been given. The challenge has been given to Buck Johnson to come on and talk about this manly man.
Defend yourself.
Defend yourself, sir, before we besmirch your names across the internet.
But by telling everybody what good friends we are.
We might love you, but respond. So I say all this to say this is that so I think the liberals want 1995, the conservatives want 1955. They're going to settle at 1985, and in 1985, by the way, what is this? Getting his earbuds in.
Oh, he's here.
The manly man himself.
With the appropriate shirt.
The manly man himself, barely clothed.
There he is.
Yes. Jim, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Buck. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I'm only disappointed that we do not see Buck Johnson eating some lamb off his spit, like literally off the kebab.
Oh, let me get this light set up.
Or eating a raw chicken.
Someone asked me, Buck, in my chat yesterday. There's like, who's the top of the hierarchy? Who's has more hierarchical status, you or Buck? I'm like, Buck. What
hierarchical status?
Yeah,
I don't have any.
Oh, neither do I. That means you have more than me.
I think it's.
I have less than any.
I think it's strictly based on your testosterone levels, right? So I think Buck's got his beat.
True.
Oh, what an article!
Yes, it's true.
So you were in an article. We haven't even got to the you part here yet. We can get to that.
We've taken your name in vain a couple times.
Yeah. So, but before we get to the actual article, what the article is trying to say about you. By the way, do you want to say this officially now? They cited you have 2 big TV screens. How many big TV screens do you have?
3. I told you the media is dishonest.
3. Buck has a trinity of screens in his house.
Have you had any blowback from the article? Anybody, giving you a hard time, or?
It depends if you think. So no, most of it, Father Moses has taken the brunt of this. It seems like to me. Jim, I would ask your opinion. Did you see the piece from the Russian bishop, or the Rokor bishop?
No. What they say?
Well, I haven't read it either, but it basically is. It seems by the title, and I'm doing the modern man thing. Well, I saw the headline, I didn't read it, and I haven't read it because I wanted to let this settle. But he basically, a Rokor bishop in England, put out a statement about how no, this is not a church that's strictly for the masculine sort of thing. It isn't. Right. Correct. Yeah. And I didn't know my again, I haven't read it, so I shouldn't even be publicly commenting, and he's a bishop. But my thought is, okay, fair. I hope he's responding to the BBC and not Father Moses, Father John, and myself.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope people understand that when a state-run liberal media company does a report on people like us, that they're putting their specific spin on it. They're not saying like Buck Johnson and Father Moses and Father John say this is just a masculine church, and if you're not right wing, get out.
Buck, just do me a quick favor, Buck. Just go to the audio section down where it should say mute on your screen. Click on that arrow and make sure your audio settings on this is set to make sure it clicks off auto adjust mic volume, because sometimes this thing likes to take over your mic. So
all right. I did that.
Yeah, just make sure it's off.
Okay.
I guess what's struck me about that article, Buck, is compared to the one that appeared a few months ago in the New York Post about, young men coming to orthodoxy. This one really banged away at the whole Russian thing. R word. I mean, they're really trying to not just make you out to be a bunch of muscular, masculine, patriarchal misogynists, but anti-rainbow, of course, but some kind of Putin stooges, Russia, and that is kind of worrisome in this environment.
Yeah, I don't want to say who it was specifically, just because it was maybe in confidence. I don't know, but I was advised by a priest that I'm close with to steer away from any sort of conversation that entered Putin, Ukraine, all of this sort of thing. And I did. I spoke with them for 2 hours. They sat here at my house, and they kept hitting on that. And a few times, sure, I answered some questions on it, vague, generally speaking, not even vaguely. And of course, that's what they included in there. The one lady was very much, it was good cop, bad cop. There was two of them. One was super sweet. One was clearly anti-Putin. And I could sense it. So I just kept trying to redirect the conversation. She asked me my thoughts on Patriarch Kirill. I told her it's not my place publicly to speak about something like that as a layman in the church, especially in ROCOR. And so I just try to steer it away from that. The manliness talk, honestly, was not like it was for sure when I left the situation. I thought, okay, this is very much anti-Russia. They're going to be their spin. They didn't get that much into the masculine talk here and there. I thought it was interesting now looking back. They said, can we get some people to interview that for a fact came to the church because they heard about it on your show? And I initially offered up one female that you met when you were down here, Jim. I offered up a couple of female names, and she goes, that's really nice, but all we're getting is females. We are trying really hard to find men, and that keeps evading us here. And I said, well, I mean, I can give you some numbers of men too, but I mean, these females I know will definitely talk to you. No, we don't want that. We don't want that. So that I should have thought about it then. I didn't at the time, but now looking back, I'm like, oh, well, because that doesn't fit the intended.
Yeah.
Let's look at
by the way, I found that Bishop's statement.
Okay. I've not read it yet.
Send it to me, Jim. Let's cover what the BBC says specifically about Buck, and then we'll get to the statement. This continuing from the BBC article. Buck Johnson, who's worked as a firefighter for 25 years and hosts the Counterflow podcast, he says that he was initially scared to enter his local Russian Orthodox church as he looks different, covered in tattoos, but tells me that he's welcome with open arms. He was also impressed the church stayed open during the COVID lockdown. Sitting on a couch in front of 3 large TV screens. We'll correct the BBC as
I'm not sure why they included that. Was to make me look dumb or something, like I watch TV all the time. I don't get it.
I don't know. It's very strange. That's a very strange thing. It's like you're two online. You have 2 screens, so that means you're I don't even know what that would. I'm pretty media literate, and I don't even know what they're trying to do with that. Sitting on a couch in front of 3 large TV screens at his home in Lockhart, he says his newfound faith is changing his view of the world. Negative American views on Russia are what are worrying me, Buck says. He tells me that mainstream legacy media presents a distorted picture of the invasion of Ukraine. I think there's a holdover from the boomer generation here in America that lived through the Cold War, Buck says. I don't quite grasp why, but they say Russia's bad. The head of the Russian church in Moscow, Patriarch Kirill, has doggedly backed the invasion of Ukraine. This is, again, these are complete and total lies, calling it a holy war and expressing a little compassion for its victims.
Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
This is just scummy.
When I asked Archpriest Father John Whiteford about Russia's top cleric, who many see as a warmonger, he assures me that Patriarch's words have been distorted. It's not just his words have been distorted. This is a complete and total lie. This is not a distortion.
And by the way, Father John Whiteford, named the article, has written on this very precisely. And anyway, keep going.
No, but we can stop there. This is a complete and total lie. That Kirill has never backed the Ukraine-Russia war. He's the head priest in. He's head bishop in Russia. His job is to support Russia in all ways possible. That doesn't mean that he's for the war or that he's it's I don't know. Sorry, this has got me upset. I'm losing my words because it's this is what I deal with when I look at Ukrainian media. I read the Ukrainian the Kiev Independent every week. And it's like literally wants me to, I want to tear my teeth out because they will literally contradict themselves and lie and then supply proof of their lies in the same article with hyperlinks and then pretend like it didn't happen. It's the most mind-blowing experience I've ever had. It's gaslighting in real time. And they're doing it with proof that they're lying. The most recent example I can think of is when they said something about the grain deal and saying that it was Russia's fault that the grain deal expired, and they had a hyperlink that if you press on it, you go back to a report they made a month before where Kiev and the EU were championing ending the grain deal. So you're like, wait, by your own admission, Ukraine and EU canceled the grain deal, but now you're blaming Russia for the consequences of the grain deal. It's like it's bizarre. It's the most weird matrix kind of craziness you want to engage with. So, anyways, gentlemen, any thoughts on that? And I'll try to find the quote from the good bishop there.
I send you the text, and I did skim it just now. I mean, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Buck. Address what Jason just asked, and I'll talk about that a bit. About the bishop.
Well, I think I hope that it seems obvious to most people that read this that they've distorted some things, and we're trying to use their. I will say this: I don't know that it was malicious. I think if your default settings, you're a British woman in their 70s who worked for a state-run media company, and you're secular, and you're obviously liberal. Of course, you view people in the ROCOR church, certainly in Texas, as they probably think we're some sort of backwards, a little bit uneducated sort. Yeah, I think they were generous. Jim, I know you probably saw the piece in Texas Monthly. I think that one was more malicious than this one.
Who's that? Megan somebody, right? That Megan girl? Yeah.
There's I find a little bit sad that the Greek lady that you mentioned was, of course, the only one painted as like, well, she's sensible.
And of course, she's not Greek. She's a convert. So I guess that was the contrast they wanted to make.
Right. And she's a nice lady. I've actually been on her show. She's in Austin. They had there's an audio version of this story that they did in a podcast format like 2-3 weeks ago. Of course, instead of her, they used hyphen girl. So it's like they have to go to the female liberal to kind of, well, there's some sensible people in this circle too. And then they call us out to look like kind of rubes or something.
You said you've been on her show?
And
how was she? I mean, how was it?
Delightful. All she does is host a show. It's on ancient faith. If that, I mean, I'm sure that doesn't surprise you, but very nice. She just does a story on people's journey to orthodoxy, and she asked me about mine. We didn't get into politics or anything. I found her delightful and kind. Then I saw this piece, and I was like, oh, okay.
Well, maybe you should go back on with her and discuss the piece.
Maybe so. They attempted to get Conrad, of course. I think he wisely he said yes, and then wisely, him and I talked about it behind the scenes after they interviewed me, and he's like, you know what, no. So he pulled back. I went on a rant, if you will, about when we did touch upon masculinity. They kept they did a few. Well, talk about all the men. What's wrong with young men? Why are they upset? Where are they coming? And I went on this long rant about how, yeah, I get it. Society, feminism, all these things that we know about are driving men somewhere. We're trying to find truth. I'm not young, man. But I said, once you get to the church, though, those things have to sort of be washed away. And I discussed stuff that Father Turbo's talked to me about, and many priests. You have to wash the inside of the cup, and you've got to let some of these proclivities against anti-female things, you have to drop that and let it go. And this is about theosis. They left all of that. Of course, they're not going to print any of that.
Of course not.
So I would say my takeaway from the reaction is, for the most part, it's been favorable. I even had people writing me like, dude, congrats. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I saw some people within Orthodox circles saying like, yeah, I'm glad this was people are pushing back on this. I'm tired of these ortho bros, or I'm tired of it's like, guys, that's their spin on us. That's not us. So I hope more people realize that. Then I guess I was more surprised that some didn't.
Yeah. Now, by the way, the bishop does here says he's not overly concerned about what he calls here as a media misrepresentation. And he does say that if there are people here coming for, political and, masculinity and all that kind of stuff, it does say a couple places that, well, that they should not stay here. They should go, which I think is the wrong answer. But later on, he gives the right answer, which is, well, if that's what you're coming to the church seeking, stay, because you will be changed. You will grow.
Well,
I think to this.
Buck, Father Turbo has spoken directly about this. Saying that many people, in his experience, that many people are coming to the church looking for like the base church, right? So it seems like, oh, you're against all the things we're against, so therefore you must be good. And then they realize that the problem is really them. That it's actually self-directed. One of the things I kind of knew without knowing before starting this my catechism is that it's really you end up knowing these things. Sorry, let me just take this off the screen. Well, we can get back to this if we want to, but you end up knowing things in order to silence doubt. That quite often the academically minded people seem to need to have those proofs in order to silence the doubt of what this is. When you're on these catechism courses, we just did the Trinity, so it's a lot of that sort of like, wait, what is this? We haven't got into energies and essences, which I'm waiting for. But once you get those, you get those breakthroughs, they kind of silence doubt, which is kind of what it's supposed to be. But most people aren't supposed to be exposed to most of the grand mysteries. That's like for theologians, for monks, for people on Mount Athos, for like don't concern yourself with that stuff. It's the same thing with the politics. It's like, look, you don't have to be engaged in the politics. You got enough problems. You got you to worry about, man. Like, look at the sin on your plate. Have you dealt with any of it? No. Well, then why are you talking about feminism in relationship to the church? Right. So maybe, I don't know if this is a question, but an invitation for conversation is that the hyper-masculinity aspect that I think Father Moses and others are talking about is useful in this time when we have this rise of the vengeful son, this rise of young men who are angry and resentful and looking to burn things down. And it's better to direct their energies into something like the prodigal son, where it's like, return, repent, redeem, find your footing, address you, stop blaming your parents, stop blaming the boomers, stop blaming everybody else. You start dealing with you. And then this is, Jordan Peterson's greatest example is like, clean your room. Yeah. Clean your room. Like, address this first, and then maybe address everything else. And I think that's what's getting lost in the conversation, because all this media wants to say is, yeah, but all this exterior, we make our money on the exterior problems, on the meta issue, not on the individual personal issue of the self.
Mhm.
In a way, it's a default setting of, I would say, like Western worship. It's like when Protestants say, well, you guys worship icons. And it's like, I think Father Jim might have made, it was either Jim or Father John in the pushback we gave on the
Mhm.
guys.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, if that's your form of worship, that's why you think that's worship. That's not our form of
Mhm.
worship. And I think there's a Western sort of view of what church is about. And so to them, and they go, oh, look at Father Moses. He's jacked and he lifts weights. And these young men, that's all they want. They just go there because he's buff or something. And Father John Whiteford's like really masculine and intelligent. They just want that. And it's like, to you guys, that's what that is. But to people that come to this church, maybe it's a draw initially. Like to me, I do think it was neat that my church didn't close during COVID. That is a draw. That is attractive. But they can't fathom that we would get there and go, cool, that was great. Now what? And look way deeper into things, because no one wants to, on the outside, wants to have that conversation. It just seems it doesn't catch headlines.
Yeah, the sticking thing. What not just what brings us to it here, but what keeps us here. And quite often you'll hear many church fathers and say, like, look, if it was a choice, why would we choose to follow a religion that makes us fast for almost half the year? why would we give up all these things if it wasn't pointing us to a truth?
If I just wanted to be masculine and tough, I would follow Andrew Tate, right?
Right.
Like, it takes no effort in changing of yourself. You just go, oh, I like money, I like cars, I like bitches, I like lifting weights. It's like, well, listen to rap and follow Tate. But this stuff, certain times of it feels like this is a little bit tough. And it does cost you. So I don't know. There's just a sad reality about media. It is what it is. I don't want to like whine and bitch like, oh, they misrepresented me. I knew, and so did Father John and Father. I didn't speak with Father Moses about this. Actually, I did. We all knew that it was a possibility that we would be misrepresented. I was instructed, just be honest, steer away from politics, and if you feel uncomfortable, say I don't want to answer that.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I just caught crap from my own priest for uploading a bunch of text to a signal group, and well, I caught crap. He corrected me, saying like, you should have take this down next time. Ask for blessing, right? Don't just share something. Ask for the blessing to do this. And funny, it was weird because before I posted it, I had my misgivings, like I should probably ask my father, but you know what? This is probably fine. And when I was corrected, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Automatically, like not even like, oh damn him. Like, what do you mean? You're taking the words from people. It's like, no, you're right. I should have asked. And that submission to authority, I feel, is the big, giant, unsaid bugaboo of all of this. Because it cuts to the heart of feminism, it cuts to the heart of liberalism, it cuts to the heart of all of this modernism itself, is by simply saying there is an authority above me that I must ask permission for simple things that I normally would have just done by myself. But I should ask permission because now I'm part of this community. I bear duties and responsibility. I'm part of this process. And where I'm at, I'm as low can be. But even my priest is, although my priest is above me, my priest is not the ultimate authority of all things. He's just the authority of me. And that kind of hierarchy, I think, is probably what cuts against the grain the hardest, especially for modernists. I think this is also why the attack vector will come not just from the BBC and other branches of Orthodoxy, but from Catholicism itself, from the neo-trads themselves, because Orthodoxy will hold that dark mirror, simply saying that you're not really obeying, not just obeying Christ and following in Christ, but you're not obeying the hierarchy that's demanded of you. You're you're not being submissive to the church itself.
Mm-hmm.
You're just spouting these things. You're getting dunked and done and looking for forgiveness and all the rest of it. Sorry,
I just want to hear some of Jim's thoughts on this stuff.
Yeah.
No, it's I've been just still mulling a little bit on the bishop's statement there, and in other words, I don't think it's bad. In other words, it's not like a condemnation. He's basically saying, well, people are here looking for some, like you said, basically, you're just here to lift weights and be macho and dismissive of women. This is not the right place. And that some of you will grow, even if that's what you've come here for. And he says, and also, paraphrasing, in a society where we've lost sight of what male and female really are, maybe it does look kind of radical that you kind of assume that men are going to be men and women are going to be women. What a crazy idea. Whose idea was that anyway?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Okay, so the masculinity of the church, the call of the Orthodox Church, and possibly I think the threat to ROCOR. We're all observing members of ROCOR in one way or shape or another. We're all attending ROCOR churches. I personally believe that, and we're starting to see this happening now. I think the BBC article is just one attack vector. I think ROCOR will come under direct attack now, in very much ways, the same ways that the Ukrainian Canonical Church did. Now there'll be a turning on this idea of a Russian church in Western lands promoting Russian values or virtues or connections to the Russian church. Yeah.
After all, the acronym ROCOR has the word Orthodox in it once, but Russian in it twice.
Exactly. Yeah. So my big question is this for you gentlemen. Is this now the better... I would say that the future for Orthodoxy in many Western lands is not to... And this is not... okay, I'm going to be very careful here. This is not a criticism of ROCOR or its leadership. However, I do believe that the future for Orthodoxy in Western lands is to have their own... Australia should have its own Australian Orthodox Church, which is in communion with the greater Orthodox body. That's my opinion.
It may be someday, but I think you're even less ready for it than we are here in America. I mean, look, Father Josiah Trenum, that I think the world of, has spoken very passionately on this topic. And frankly, I think it all boils down to, really, under whom? I mean, suppose we had all one Orthodox jurisdiction under Archbishop Elpidophoros. Would that be an improvement? I don't think so. I mean, especially as we saw during COVID, having more than one jurisdiction was a lifesaver, maybe literally in some cases, where you could basically say, okay, I don't like these guys. They're basically knuckling under, and they're more Orthodox, more Catholic than the Pope when it comes to obeying the safety rules. I'm going to go somewhere else. And you wouldn't have that luxury. Frankly, even people in Russia didn't have that luxury, because some of the stuff in Russia was pretty crazy with the, cleaning the communion spoon and vodka and things like that. I mean, they did some goofy stuff over there. They were pressuring people to get the vax. I mean, so, in principle, I think you're right, Jason. As a practical matter, and if you look at when other traditionally Orthodox countries actually got their own autocephalous church, it was not an easy or quick process. And it'll be even more complicated with us, where we're living in a tiny minority in an overwhelmingly non-Orthodox and increasingly non-Christian country.
No, I mean, and fair enough. Buck, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I echo Jim's sentiment. We've both been part of the Ludwell conference twice now, and that discussion comes up every year. Dr. Clark Carlton has interesting thoughts on it. It's always like, yes, it would be preferable in some ways to have an American Orthodox or a Southern American Orthodox or something, but I mean, it's like under what patriarch? That's
Texas. Well, because autocephalous, we'll have our own American patriarch. We'll have a Texas Orthodox Church of the I don't know, the Corpus Christi Patriarchate.
Fair enough. And it's just like, well, out of which, where does that bishop
Yeah,
come
yeah, yeah,
from. If it's some of if it's some of the monks that I've met in America, I'd love that.
yeah,
But that's always a bit of a risk. But it's such a political environment. Even it doesn't always touch orthodoxy in America too heavily as it might in some other places. But boy, it's still an issue. I mean,
yeah.
there's going to be look at who they can go get for. Who do you think they want out of this article that was penned? Which voice do you think they'd want representing the church? I know it's a woman.
The nice lady, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, and one little note on this too, because we've mentioned ROCOR so many times, I do get a little annoyed with all this jurisdictionalism that, okay, ROCOR, that's the real Orthodox, they're the based Orthodox, and, and the Greeks, they're the soy Orthodox, It's not that simple. And as you know, there's some pretty squishy people on any number of fronts in ROCOR. There's some really good guys in the Greek Archdiocese, the Antiochians, the rest of it. I mean, we're still all one church, and we've got our problems, and all the jurisdictions have problems. And you know what? Life has problems. People have problems. And
to my knowledge, there's far more squishy liberal Orthodox, whatever you want to call that, coming out of, let's say, the Western traditions or Western representatives of Orthodoxy than in the East. Like you take the most squishy Greek Orthodox, and you actually dive into what they're saying, and it's 10 times more based than you're going to find anywhere in the West. In terms of practice, right? Like,
well,
it depends on what we're again.
I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about practice, like integration into one's life. Like how much are you doing? Because I mean, let's take the politics conversation out of it completely, right? Let's all the based and bullshit out of it. It's what are you doing? How are you living? Are you living it every day? Are you waking up every day with a prayer rule? Are you lighting your candles? Are you saying your prayers? Are you saying your Jesus prayer during the day? Are you doing these things? Yes or no?
Are you giving alms? Are you fasting? Are you doing all of those things? Yeah.
Right. To whatever degree you can. If no, then get back to basics. Like none of this other stuff matters. It's how subservient you are to the practice of the church. Period.
Yeah.
How much are you living this? Is it your phronema? Is it a state of being?
Yeah.
Put all the podcasts, all the books, all the rest of it to the side. They're all great and wonderful. And look, Buck, myself, and Jim, we're all in this milieu, right? So we're all, it sounds like we're almost saying, don't follow us, don't listen to us. No, listen to us, please, and send us your money. By the way, send us your super chat.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, are you living it? Yeah. Are you living it in every single way, in every single day? If not, then there's a problem, and you got to address that problem. And I think there are far more traditional Greek Orthodox people who are doing that than a lot of people are coming to ROCOR. I'm just going to throw that out there, right? That a lot of people have come to this in the last 5 years, myself included, who think they're all that, and it's like, yeah, but are you doing it? Are you doing the work? And the work is not just doing a podcast or reading the book,
right?
Or giving a review on Father Seraphim Rose.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I do think too, this is probably stating the obvious, people that really are doing the work could also sit down for an interview with the media company and it will be perceived that they are something other than that. Right. Some of the holy, well, look at Father Peter. I love him. Look at what the flack that he gets. Father Turbo would have sat down with with people, despite what his skin color is. I guarantee you, he would have been painted as some sort of, extremist. And in a way, maybe in secular society of this world, that is extremist. My own priest, I joked once that someone else called him an extremist, and he just smiled and nodded yes. So. It's all relative, and it's like extreme to what? Yeah, that sure. I guess it is.
Yeah, to be a fundamental Christian means to be as close to Christ as possible. We have a term for that. It's called theosis.
Yeah.
Like the most fundamental you can be, the most fundamental aspect of Christianity you can, makes you glow with holy divinity. Yeah, okay. I can be a fundamentalist on that level. Just one last point, gentlemen, and I don't want to keep you forever. It's an offshoot idea of this. Is that okay? So obviously, bottom lines being drawn. This desire for Russell Brand Christianity is present in society and is being substantiated. And more people are flocking to at least the idea of Christianity, right? Which we can always see as a positive thing. Orthodoxy now is being held as a counterpoint, as I think many people who are unaware of Orthodox Christianity is like they're the weird ones, they're the extreme ones, right? So what are our thoughts about Orthodoxy going forward, because this is not going to stop. I think the BBC we'll call it report is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going to get more and more intense, especially as I've said this multiple times now. When Russia wins this war, and they're going to win this war in one way or another, it's going to break people's brains. I've had these conversations personally of people who are addicted to mainstream media, who are telling me that there's no way on earth that Russia's going to win this war, and suddenly the day that's going to be announced on BBC, ABC, CBC, all the C's, that Russia's won this war, their brain's going to break, and at that moment they're going to seek blame, and they're going to put that blame directly on the church. I think. Because it'll be the most, what can they attack? Where's Russia here? Well, Russia's in ROKOR. ROKOR's in your community. They're going to attack ROKOR. It's not. I say this not to dissuade people from joining. It's just more of an awareness of what's coming, because I see it clear as day. Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Go ahead, Jim. You're much wiser than
I think you're onto something. Especially when you link it to the Russell Brand form of Christianity. Let's suppose, for the sake of discussion, that the people who are the most influential in our society really don't like the idea of large numbers of people becoming Christians of any sort, really, any serious kind of Christian, much less Orthodox Christians, much less belong to ROKOR. And so what you do is you find the weak link. Let me give an example of that. One of the primary movers of enacting prohibition in the United States was to build on anti-German sentiment from World War I and go after the brewers. In other words, their target was alcohol, basically. They wanted prohibition. And they said, but, we've got all these people whipped up with this anti-German sentiment. How can we use this? We'll go after Schlitz and Stroh's and all these Germans. Not every German enemy was over in Europe, And they used that very, very effectively to ram through their prohibition. Now, suppose the authorities are saying, oh, more people are, rejecting all these godless values and all the rainbow stuff, et cetera, et cetera. We need to find some way to go after these bad conservative Christians, traditional Christians. Who's the most traditional of the crowd? Oh, and guess what? They're with the enemy, the Russian enemy. Let's go after them. So I think that could be part of what we see coming to a church near you in the not too distant future.
Yeah, that was the part that they took from one of the things I said and actually printed it was I said I was concerned about the media narrative shifting Americans' views on Russia to a negative perspective. Because of Father John, what happened to his church? There was a bomb threat. Right. I'm at a ROKOR parish. Now we're in a small town, a bit outside of big cities. Still, it's not because I wake up and give prostrations to Putin's icon. It's because I'm worried because people I know and love are in many Americans' eyes, associated with Russia, even
yeah.
though, it's just a parish we go to.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does concern me. It's like, then I'm not a Russophile or something like that. It's just like, yeah, I'm naturally concerned because I care about these parishes. I don't see, my priest has never sat down one time, nor has Father John, maybe outside of a conversation or two on the show, and said, let's talk about Putin. Man, I mean, what a guy, right? Yeah, but that's what they would like to paint us as, and that's worrisome.
Well, guaranteed. I'm waiting for the report. I'm waiting for the day the report's going to come out, saying that they pray, they make prayers towards the Russian military and Archbishop Kirill, and all these bishops who are part of the Russian, and these people are bad. They're Russia bad. Everything pertaining to Russia bad. They're making prayers for the Russian military in Australia, in America, in these places.
I mean, technically, we pray for Biden.
Sure, but they're going to leave that out, Buck. That's the whole point, right?
And by the way, it will be very helpful to this campaign when you have some good Orthodox, some of the worst elements, like in the Greek Church, in the Greek Archdiocese, who are saying, "Oh no, we're the real Orthodox, real values, because we are tolerant and love everybody, and we, and we're real chummy with the Pope, by the way, too. Another big selling point. And those are the bad Orthodox because they're basically Putin's political bishops, and they can be basically the false witness against us."
Yeah, there's a priest that I wasn't familiar with until today, that was going off on Father Moses and Father John, saying that the masculinity charade is a false theology and that we're jokes and all of this stuff. That's him. Speaking of false theology, he's Go Arch. I don't know the fella.
For the audio listeners, Buck just held a picture of a priest in a full COVID mask.
Well, getting a jab by someone else.
Well, getting a jab too. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, he's getting a jab, and I actually responded. And I said, speaking of false theology, is this you?"
Yes.
But I didn't get a response yet. So, but those are the types that are going to be listed as like the heroic, the real loving Christians.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't know if it's just my feed or otherwise, but I've been seeing massive attacks against two major figures, Jay Dyer and Father Peter Heers. Right. And now, of course, it all seems to be spawning from the excommunication of the nun. Please remind me of her name.
Sister Vasa.
Yes.
No longer sister, but yeah.
Yes, no longer sister. That news story seemed to spawn a new attack vector. I don't know why. Against specifically against Jay Dyer and Father Peter Heers. We're being named. I mean, my feed's full of it, right? Because I follow a lot of different accounts just to see like who's saying what, and the Catholics are up in arms, and the Protestants are up in arms.
Catholics are,
no.
Why
are they up in arms? It's none of their damn business.
Yeah,
I have no idea why, but I have at least three different Catholic YouTube channels which are nothing. All taking aims against discussing discussing Jay Dyer and Father Peter Heers by name in the title of other episodes. So
they happen to be the most, I would say, online vocal, let's say, Orthodox apologists into apologetics that are very strident, and I would say correct, but they might be viewed as strident on Catholicism. So I think that would be those both would be natural targets. And they have both been on that guy Ruslan, that I'm not real familiar with them.
Me neither.
I only saw Father Peter on and then Jay Dyer on because I like both of them. But that's a pretty big show, and they were somewhat, brutally honest about certain.
He's a fraud, though. Right? He's Protestant.
He is. Yeah. But he got into the salvation aspect or inside the church, outside the church. So if there's a Catholic, and they got into Jay Dyer got into Catholicism with this guy Sam Shamoud that attacked him. So they got into that stuff too. I mean, I assume that's why those guys are attacked. I can't imagine that they'd have any thoughts on Sister Vasa or
Vasa.
whatever. Yeah,
I was
Vasa.
saying, I'm seeing all these different attack vectors coming out at all the same time. So there's Sister Vasa, and then all of a sudden, like this massive. And again, I agree with you, Buck. They both were on Ruslan, but so was Jonathan Pajot and Dirtpar Robbins.
The Dirtpar Robbins, yeah, the band.
Yeah, they're both on. They're a bit more apologetic to the Protestant view. I mean, I think Jonathan Pajot was trying to he was put on the spot, and he did his best, and God bless him. But also, Jonathan is not a church father, right? He's not apologetic. He doesn't involve himself in debates like Jay Dyer. He's certainly not a church father like Father Peter Hears. So he has a different kind of space to fill, let's say, in that conversation, and they didn't go after him, right? So I just find it very interesting, and it seems to be this constant attack now, and I do believe it has a lot to do with, as we said on the show quite often, Jim, whether it's today or tomorrow or next week or at the end of the year, Russia's won this war. The realization that Russia's won this war is going to start hitting people either now or next week or whenever it does, whenever it's fully disclosed. And at that point, people are going to have to look for reasons because they will not be able to deal with the fact that they're wrong. I've had almost fist fights in my house.
In other words, scapegoating. They're going to look for somebody to blame.
I've had people literally get almost violent with me in my house about the subject. And all I said to them is like, Russia's won this war. You just have to get used to it. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. There was no condition that Russia would not have won this war. Like, the idea that Russia was ever going to give up any of these territories once they claimed them is crazy. And it's not dealing with reality. But that break in reality is going to cause people to react. And that's kind of where we're at.
Well, you know what, guys? The bottom line is, something along these lines is probably going to happen. And if it happens, there's nothing we can do about it. It's going to happen on its own logic, except that we can endure it, we can resist it, and we'll deal with it or whatever comes. I mean, because ultimately, by being politically clever, we're not going to be able to do much about it. We just have to endure it and take this as part of a tribulation that maybe will be good for us in some way, like COVID.
Hey, I can tell you something personally. Is like, suffering is good. It sucks, but it's good. It brings you to it, gentlemen. I try to warn you. By James George Jatras, available in print copy at all your favorite bookstores, on Amazon and all the other places. Also on Kindle. Links in the description below. Buck Johnson of Counterflow Podcast. Please, you just put out a new episode, Buck. I didn't catch it live. Let the people know all about you and your show. I don't know why anyone who's watching the show is not following you. If that's the case, that's a sin. They should they should rectify. Well,
it's all about being macho, manly, masculine, and hating women. That's what we're all about.
Macho man.
Yeah,
Buck is an unapologetic. Buck is an unapologetic short wearer. I'm sure there's pictures out there.
There are. Last time I saw Jim in person, we had a few drinks, and he said, "What is it? Why do you always need to show all the tattoos?" And I said, "I don't need to." And he goes, "Every time I see you in a short sleeve shirt." Now I'm upping myself, Jim. I came on with no sleeves. I don't even have anything to plug. I'm a big fan of Jim Jatras and Jason MIRONCHUCK. So that book is on the top shelf of my bookshelf. The Jim Jatras book. I highly recommend it. In there, Jason, look at the back of that book. Where's this? Look who he's pictured with. The two best politicians, I would say ever, but certainly of my lifetime. Jim Jatras is standing there with
base
and Ron Paul.
Pat Pageddon and Ron Paul. There you go.
That is, yeah. And so if that doesn't sell you on the book, I don't know what will.
I don't either.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
And you can get your copy on Kindle for like what, $6? It's like nothing.
Did we lose Jim? Did he go?
Oh, we might have.
Oh,
This happens.
yeah.
There he is, and he's back. And of course, ladies, $6.99. Ladies and gentlemen,
yeah.
Put me on your payroll. You can give me money directly through Streamlabs or PayPal. Like, subscribe, and let the people know where to find us. All the numbers are back. I'm out of YouTube jail, apparently. I don't know why, but we're back. Hey, like, subscribe, and share the show. Numbers are going up. I appreciate everyone in the chat. Stick around, folks. We're gonna wrap up here. We're gonna do a little post stream talk, I'm sure, and then get into a members only chat. So stick around. They'll be redirected. I appreciate all of you. If you're listening on Substack or Spotify, there'll be that members only over on the subscriber count. Please go ahead and subscribe over there as well. I appreciate all of your support. I am Jason MIRONCHUK, and it's later than you think.